Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion titled Designing for a Resilient Future, BIG's Philosophy and Sustainable Solutions Around the World and Especially in the Mediterranean. It's my privilege to introduce today Hanna Johansson, a partner at BIG, Bjarke Ingels Group, based in Barcelona, one of the world's leading obviously architecture firms known for its innovative approach to design. And I'm sure everyone is very familiar with BIG's work. Today, Hanna will share with us insights about BIG's sustainable design strategy and how they address pressing challenges of the 21st century, like energy consumption, carbon footprints, and social well-being. She will also explore BIG's projects in Greece, Cyprus, and the broader Mediterranean region, highlighting the firm's ability to adapt to global solutions to local context. Please join me in welcoming Hanna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invite, and it's really a pleasure to be here. So I thought I would start by showing you a little bit of BIG's work and who we are, and afterwards I think we're going to have a little bit of a conversation to follow that. So just starting from the basics, we are a Copenhagen sort of founded company that then has sort of migrated a little bit across the globe with main offices in Copenhagen, New York, London, and Barcelona. And then we have some smaller representative offices as well. And you can see our new headquarters that opened in Copenhagen last year up on the left, and our Barcelona office down on the right side. So the offices somehow also reflect the location they're in. On the upper right, we have New York, and then our London office on the lower left. And we are, as mentioned, a growing and global company. We're more than 700 architects worldwide, and around 100 in Barcelona, where we also have a large variety of nationalities on the staff, which also helps us to create a bigger kind of understanding for different cultures and traditions. And of course, I mean, we have a very strong work ethic, and if you don't want our architecture, we can also do haircuts. But the way we work is generally through a sort of iterative process where we assess program requirements, restrictions from the site, the local code, the culture, the climate, and so on, and we do explore many options of any project we approach, and in a sort of survivals of the fittest, find the solution that we think sort of is the right answer for the specific question. And when we asked what we work with as architects, it's in a little bit of everything, I would say. We give form from everything to everything, from products to the planet and everything in between. And just looking back a little bit, sort of where it all started in 2005 when BIG was founded. We since have had this quick sort of development of both in Northern Europe, of course, where it started, but migrating towards the US with a larger focus on the educational, on high-rise, and expanding both our geographical kind of building location, but also our programmatic diversity. And when we work, we do have some sort of key values that we focus on. One of them being, of course, community, where here it's the start of a master plan in Denmark, where we propose to start establishing the social network before the actual residential units. Of course, here is the Copenhagen, or the waste-to-energy plant, with where you can ski on the roof. We work, of course, with this sort of almost basic element of architecture, which is the residential units. We do large-scale and small-scale work environments. We migrated or started our office in New York with this project on West 57, which is what we call a court scraper that merges the New York typology of the skyscraper with the courtyard that is typical to our home in Copenhagen. And of course, culture, this is a sort of gallery that is also a bridge and a sculpture to some extent that is forms a part of a sculpture park in Norway. And of course, hospitality as a growing segment. This is one of our smallest projects in the north of Sweden. We designed a home to one of the world's best restaurants in Copenhagen. And of course, we also look at larger projects like stadiums, and in this case, for the Oakland's A, with a sort of regeneration master plan around it. And of course, working with aspects, as Christele mentioned, of resilience and how we can future-proof our cities. We also work with Elon Musk to kind of establish the Hyperloop with the stations and the cars. Urbanism is a growing focus, I would say, in terms of master planning. This is in Tokyo at the foot of Mount Fuji, where we did this master plan together with Toyota. And of course, also expanding cities and sort of reclaiming land. And to start sort of focusing in a little bit on the topic of today and sustainability in a sort of broader spectrum, of course, most of our projects these days get some form of a sustainability rating. But beyond that, we try to work with sustainability in a sort of the very fundamental way when we design. So what we call the sustainable dress, the energy mansion in Shenzhen is a high-rise tower and the headquarters for the municipal kind of energy company. And what sort of works for us here is that the facade is designed as a pleated dress, let's say. On one side towards the north is fully glazed. To the south, it's fully opaque and insulated. And in that sense, it creates this kind of playful facade that we believe is interesting architecturally. It opens up larger glazed areas where there are amenity spaces. And of course, it creates this kind of mild and quite elegant profile, I believe. But what it also did is that it decreased the energy consumption of the building with around 30%, which of course was quite exciting for this energy company. And it's also a sculpture that stands out in the city. And of course, you don't need necessarily the blue or the black glass when the facade is sort of designed and tailored to the climate specifically. Another take on sort of how you can work with sustainability is maybe in a slightly more kind of social aspect, what we call the hedonistic sustainability, where we try the sort of sustainable measurements to be of positive kind of approach. This is the waste to energy plant, quite centrally located in Copenhagen. It's so clean so that we can actually have people skiing and hiking on top of the building that's around 85 meters tall. And this was a competition we did quite many years ago now, but we were challenged to do a facade for this waste-to-energy plant. And when we looked at it, of course, it's a great potential in burning waste. And when you can do it in such a clean way, we can actually see it as a benefit, these mountains of waste that exist in all countries and also in Copenhagen. But in Denmark, of course, there are actually no mountains. It's one of the, together with the Netherlands, an incredibly flat country. So we could see that to have the potential of sort of organizing the program from smaller to taller, we could have a height drop on the building itself that we could actually propose a ski slope on top of it that has a black, a red, a blue, and a green piste. And the Danish alpine ski team now actually practices on this hill, and it's really become a meeting point for citizens to come to this place that actually is industrial grounds. And looking like a park from one side, it looks like a vertical building on the other side, and we actually took advantage of that moment and have proposed the world's tallest artificial climbing wall here. Which is quite an adventure to go up for the daring ones. There's also an elevator for the rest of us inside. And when you travel through that elevator, you also get a glimpse into the sort of heart of the building, the industrial burning process. And then there's a public platform, a viewing platform on the top of the building. And I think it's become quite loved also as a backdrop to The Little Mermaid. And sort of it's something that's grown into the hearts of the Copenhageners. In California, we designed the headquarters for Google. In these two kind of tent-like structures or solar domes are 4,400 workstations, all collected under one roof. And of course, Google, they're both targeting zero emissions and carbon neutrality. But also a kind of fully flexible work environment where you have equal daylight spread through these kind of quite vast areas. And this is, there's one layer of amenities and support functions under one level of office workstations that can be flexibly adapted whenever the need kind of comes. And the sort of smiles, as we call them, of daylight, spread a very even kind of daylight throughout the full building. And of course, you have utter flexibility with these 40-meter spans throughout the space. And the roof itself is covered with these kind of dragon-scale photovoltaic panels, which we developed together with a small startup company in Switzerland. And then the building opens up further towards the lake in this case, and to give direct daylight throughout. This building also has the largest geothermal heat pump system in North America. So it works with sustainability, both in production from the sun and from the earth. In Sevilla, in Spain, we had another take on sort of utilizing solar panels to produce energy. This is the Joint Research Center for the European Commission. It was also a competition we won some years ago and has been developing since. And it sort of creates this cascade of solar umbrellas covering on one side of the building a public plaza. So it was more as a gift to the city, while the building itself is a very pragmatic and simple kind of office slab. And then on the other hand side, on the back side, is a sort of garden for the researchers and the workers in the building. And of course, in this case, we did really research how do you work with climate, and traditionally in Sevilla, there's a lot of shading on the streets, there's the arcades, the columns, and sort of different measurements how to create a comfortable environment. And we sort of picked up on that, creating, as mentioned, a simple building under this kind of cascade or solar dome. On one side public, on the other side private. And beyond that, of course, this umbrella also deals with the water collection, and it has a heat pump, geothermal heat pump system as well. And what I think it does interestingly is also that it's a public building, and it has a very transparent ground floor, of course, with all the public amenities kind of directly connected to the public plaza. And then it has this kind of diagonal or traveling void, as we call it, that connects openly all the office floors and can create sort of a little bit more of social encounters, and also promote people actually using the staircase rather than always taking the elevator. And that also extends this idea of having smaller areas to meet and sort of gather throughout the terraces of the building as well. And just after we won the competition, we just discovered that Ursula von der Leyen, our client, took the building or the rendering to be blessed by the Pope. And I think within seconds, our team kind of started sending around the same rendering in a lot of historical kind of moments of varying significance, you could say. Just if we focus a little bit then on more like the carbon footprint, of course, looking at materiality, wood and timber is something we see more and more being used in structural kind of aspects, also on larger scale buildings. This one currently under development is the extension of the Zurich airport. When it's done, it will be the largest mass timber construction in the world. And it's this kind of very simple building that sort of sits around a tower and extends out with a route, as we call it, into the new terminal. And sort of a very simple kind of geometry that has a changing section as you move through. And the atrium that is created almost by that kind of tower becomes the sort of orientational kind of anchor in the project. And of course, it's all kind of very coherent as a space by the sort of presence of the mass timber and the kind of continuous skylight. And here you can see the changing section from the end, where it's sort of a rectangular traditional section and growing up into a kind of quite steep pitched roof in the center of the project. And of course, here wood really felt logical. It has a smaller carbon footprint, of course. It's also in a region where there is wood. So this is Swiss wood for the Swiss airports. In another area where, of course, there's also kind of plenty of timber around is in Norway, where we have designed what we call what is the world's cleanest factory. It's together with Vestre, which produces sort of social and public furniture in Norway. And it's a very simple kind of plus-shaped building. And the goal that we aligned together with the client, of course, was rather than a factory being what you see on top, more focused, it's typically dirty, it's very enclosed areas, and somehow not inviting, right? To rather do a factory building that is green, that is transparent, and that also actually welcomes visitors into the sort of heart of the factory. So this was the goal when we designed the building. It has this kind of central atrium where you have access from the roofscape down, and the sort of general functions are centered around this, where you can also visit. The sort of tracing on the floor describes the routing for the production. And the 4 wings of the building, or the 4 arms of the 𝗲, all have a unique kind of function, from the warehouse to the furniture production to assembly and so on. So beyond that, people that visit can accessibly also come all the way up to the roof, and they can see into the building. The workers that are in the building can also see and enjoy the location, right? So they're not in a sort of dark bubble. And what we did here was to ensure that the plants on the green roof would really grow and spire and sort of be a part of increased biodiversity. We did actually dig up the plants on site, or a selection of them. We stored them, and then they were planted back on the roof. And that sort of course, created this building that is entirely kind of integrated within the building. So, of course, being sustainable, it also has solar panels, the geothermal, it's a timber building. It also tries to reinvent somehow what a factory typology can mean to people around it. And then on another take and another scale, in the very north of Sweden, we designed the biosphere, which is a 1-bedroom hotel unit as a part of the Tree Hotel in Harrods, very far up in Sweden. And we agree that beyond housing a person or a couple, it could also be the home to 360 birds, bees, and bats. So we did, together with an expert, of course, a big survey on what kind of species of birds live in the area. We designed the actual houses for these birds to match the proportion, the size of the hole, etc. And we distribute them around the hotel room itself. And what is good to know is actually birds don't shit where they live, so it's incredibly clean. It has an accessible ramp leading into it, and the interior is actually entirely dark. So when you're in there, your focus goes to the exterior and to these birds' houses that surround you. This is the view when you wake up in bed and look straight up. And then maybe not the most typical material to talk about when we do talk about sustainability is of course concrete. This is our own headquarters in Copenhagen. It sits in a harbor area that is currently being developed. And what is interesting here, I think, is that the concrete both has a sort of, it's called FutureCem, and it has a large degree of cement replacement, which drops the carbon content with around 30%. It also has a natural stone column that is the only column within the building, so it's more resistant stone at the bottom and becomes more and more brittle types of stone towards the top. And then it has a clear span from these story-high beams on the facade to the central column, and one stair that connects all these floors into one open kind of workspace that is distributed on 7 floors, actually. So it's sort of the challenge, right? How do you create one workspace and where everyone collaborate and feel that they're part of the same office in a larger area? But what this also did is that the concrete that's exposed in the exterior, when it withers over the years, it also embodies and captures carbon dioxide. So over the full lifespan of the building, it actually was, in this case, better than the mass timber that was our other option to use as a structural material in this case. And what we also discovered is that if it doesn't really work as an office space, it works incredibly well as a party place or a nightclub. And I know Christele was there on the opening that we did around a year ago now. And then in terms of resilience and the issues with flooding, I think it's increasingly relevant. We just had the issues in Spain. just some weeks ago, with actually, unfortunately, in Valencia, with quite a few casualties. And we worked on this project that is called the Dry Line. It's to protect the lower Manhattan from flooding. And it came up as a project after the storm Sandy some years back, and we were looking at this increasing kind of area that's exposed to hurricanes and the sort of risk of superstorms happening, which is increasing. And of course, it was a big disaster. The lower Manhattan was out of electricity for 3 days. And what we were asked to do was really to rethink how we can protect this urban area from flooding going forward. And of course, Manhattan, as many other places, are built on regained land, which makes it very vulnerable. And rather than kind of building walls, which is the traditional measurement to keep the water out, we were thinking or asking ourselves, how can we create a flood protection that is also a social infrastructure. So doing a technical solution or an infrastructure that is really for people. And the answer in this case was that in some areas, depending on the need for each neighborhood, we designed parks that could also be flooded and act as that kind of buffer towards the water. And in this case, an area that can be closed when the water comes. And as a part of it was also this idea of actually exposing people in this museum to the different sea levels that happened during different times. And you can see the Hurricane Sandy marked there as well. And it's actually now it's completed. This image is a little bit old. The first phase on the east side is currently completed. And then just kind of briefly on adaptive reuse, which I think is one key element, of course, in a sustainable future, is to use our existing structures. And this was for 𝗏𝗏, the restaurant I mentioned in Copenhagen, where it's a military warehouse that is protected, that we worked into, with these kind of additions of smaller pavilions around it. And of course, working with local materials as brick, as timber, all connected by this one kind of continuous skylight or circulation of glass, where each function was focused around the central kitchen. And each space somehow created a different ambience, from the larger dining hall to the private dining room or the lounge, all kind of picked up on different aspects of local, traditional Danish kind of construction methods and materials in this case. And then actually to wrap it up, one last project that is currently under construction just very close by here is the Park Rise in Ellinikon. Where it kind of creates a cascade of single-family homes which all have access to larger outdoor areas and terraces. And that comes from a part of really digging into what is the Mediterranean kind of lifestyle and what is important. And these kind of semi-covered outdoor spaces in the extension of your home became something quite significant. And it sort of creates this building that is both a sort of high-rise or a tower and a cascade of single-family homes, so peaks and valleys. And the buildings open up in the center to connect the park to the neighborhood. And of course, we also brought up greenery for biodiversity, but also, of course, for well-being onto the building, and each terrace has a tree of its own. And of course, the amenities are located, and both the garden and the interior kind of pavilion with the gym and the spa and all of this is positioned under a pergola of PV panels as well, to kind of balance the energy production with the consumption of the building. And I think what's interesting is, of course, we work with quite multidisciplinary teams when we do any kind of project, and we really try to work very closely with our local kind of architects and clients, of course, to get the knowledge of the local market more deeply than we can see as sort of the international architect as well. And I think that was a little bit of an intro to BIG and how we try to approach, I would say, sustainability in different ways. That is not one big philosophy where there's one answer to any question, but really to project specifically see what is the potential in each case.
Thank you, Hanna, for this fascinating exploration. Like, also perfect on time, I have to say.
Oh.
Okay, so it's really inspiring to see how innovative architecture can actually address global challenges, that the world is going through different global challenges while adapting to different local contexts. which brings me to my first question. How does BIG adapt its philosophy or its global philosophy to different cultures? Because you just mentioned this in the latest project in Greece. But I really want to focus this also on the Mediterranean itself.
Yes. I think it really comes down, of course, to a combination of bringing a sort of a vast kind of experience from our global work into the specific market. But in that sense also, we try to be truly respectful to what is the kind of local way, what is the local culture, what is the local climate, and of course the need of program and so on for each project. But in doing so, we do spend in our process with each project, with, let's say, concept, it's typically 8 weeks or so. We dedicate around 2 weeks to really dig in and research the kind of local context primarily, and working very closely with our local counterpart, which we believe is fundamental in creating a deeper understanding. And then we of course, also question, is it the right way? Have things been done a certain way because it's the best way to do it, to build, to live? Or is it because a certain kind of restraint has been there that maybe now we have other ways to approach? But we really do try to analyze the way of living. And I think in the Mediterranean specifically, of course, there is, typically there's measurements regarding the sun and the heat, which is also, of course, a potential to produce energy, as you saw in some of the examples. But also the lifestyle, right? That is different from the Nordics, for instance, where it's more about the interior space. Here we sort of have the potential to really use the indoor and outdoor kind of relationship in much larger degree.
So it's about cultural and environmental contexts
that
are very particular to each one of, let's say, regions.
Exactly. And then beyond that, of course, we also look at local materials, local construction methods, and also somehow historically, and maybe it's a little bit more of a detail, but for instance, on the last project, the Park Rise, the sort of facade, it's a concreteous facade, GRC. It picks up the geometry of the Doric kind of column in sort of a completely modern way. But I do think it's nice when you approach a building and when you get closer, you can start seeing some degree of detail that actually reflects or sort of plays with the kind of local heritage. Yeah.
Since you mentioned materials, you did talk about concrete and BIG's HQ, you did talk about timber and other projects, but I want to ask you about the use of innovative materials. And could you highlight some certain examples where material innovation and choices played a really transformative role in the design?
Yes. I think beyond what we mentioned, I think, I mean, in terms of innovative materials, I think that is something that we explore with each project, that the sort of problems or challenges that poses with the project somehow leads to that kind of innovation, I would say. We developed the photovoltaics for the Google, specifically for that, and we work together with the 𝗕𝗓𝘀𝗀𝘀 to develop that product, right? But we can also see, we just launched a 𝗏𝗏𝗏 hotel. It's in Japan. It uses rammed earth as a methodology of construction, right? And the structural elements. And the precision is beautiful in Japan, just on a side note. But that then also shapes the building. It forms like the architecture becomes dependent on what can you do with this specific material, and it also becomes the interior kind of impression or expression of the building itself. So I do think it's a combination of the innovative kind of aspects of a project. It rises very much from the problems posed and the exploration on those specific projects. And of course we use different technologies. Also when we develop the projects, we spoke about it before, I think AI is somehow becoming increasingly a tool we use when developing the projects themselves. And I think we see that growingly from image production to animations to test fitting floor plans and so on. It's a tool for us to explore faster. So I think technology comes into play on sort of all kinds of levels of a project's lifetime, you could say, or lifespan.
Yeah, a tool for creativity, I would say.
A tool for creativity, beautiful.
Since we are talking about innovation, I really want to understand your definition of innovation, because it's a word that is thrown around just like sustainability, but for the office, what is actually innovation?
I would say I don't think innovation, it doesn't have a visual, right? It's not, it's not something you look at the building and you say it's innovative. I think tradition can also be innovative in the right moment. And I think we try to, what we say is sort of give form to the future, right? And I think somehow the projects become innovative when they respond in the best way to the specific conditions. I think innovation can happen from materiality to sort of reinvent how people live, how people use a space, to be a form of gift to the public or to the residents, and sort of when the project kind of does more than was expected, I think often there's some degree of innovation in there. Like the 𝗕𝗂𝘀𝘆 project, where you can ski on the roof, it sort of becomes not only a sort of a factory or energy production kind of machine almost, but it becomes something for the residents that they also grow to like and become a symbol of the city and something that they are actually proud of. And it's sort of, for our kids growing up, it's a whole nother kind of reality for them where you can ski on the roof of buildings. And I think it pushes sort of future generations forward to see that these things are actually kind of possible, right?
Yeah. And it's obviously a very iconic project that blends public use with infrastructure. And from what I know is this is a brief that you brought in, right?
Yes.
So initially it was a factory.
Yes. No, exactly. So the competition that we did then quite a few years ago was to do a facade for the factory, and this idea kind of came up, and we actually didn't think we could win it, but win with this proposal because it was a little bit sort of out of the box, and this is a municipal project. But there was this one woman in the jury and at the municipality that saw the potential with this kind of scheme and this approach and what it could do for the city. And she, I think, maybe more than us, sort of made this happen and come true. So, of course, we can do only so much as architects and urban planners and landscape architects, but we also need a counterpart on the client side or on the municipality to want to enable that. And I think Copenhagen, I'm Swedish myself, and for sure I would say Copenhagen is much more advanced in that than where I come from. So I do think a project to really come true, we all know how many steps along the way there is. It needs to have the right support.
But a lot of your projects actually redefine the relationship between utility and recreation also, right?
Yes.
Is there any other example that we can mention?
I think we also looked at the Plus, which is quite a recent project. It's a factory, it's a private factory, and again there it's quite an ambitious client. But I think it's also nice that it sort of rethinks what sort of factory program can be like for the city, and that it can give to people more than rather just being a machine for production of a product. It can really be something people actually come and visit and they see and they experience. So I do think that sort of this kind of more like infrastructural kind of projects can become really, really interesting. And we also looked at the dry line, which is a pure kind of more like at an urban scale infrastructure that become a social kind of actually gathering point and sort of, again, a resource for the city.
We were discussing also the Shenzhen energy mention, and we talked a lot about, well, you talked about energy efficiency. Yeah. So what lessons, for example, from this project could be applied to an energy intensive area like the Mediterranean?
Yeah, I think it sort of, it has some of the similar challenges in terms of course, the sun. As much as we love it, it's also quite difficult in terms of the energy spent on cooling as a consequence, right? So I think what we learned there is that I think if you really think and you let the sort of process take the time it needs, you can question what is the traditional way of doing a curtain wall like you do on a sort of skyscraper, to actually analyze, and this is sort of in a very kind of passive way, what can a building do to perform without mechanicals being necessary. And this is quite basic, right? We glaze it towards north, we close it towards south, and that is something very basic that we can then apply in different kind of climates, right? But of course, what we've done in some other areas, like in Sevilla, for instance, is to provide that shading, which is sort of similar, right? By actually shading a public space that also shades the building. So I think that somehow is a win-win for the building and for the energy consumption of that, but also for the citizen, if you talk about as a sort of gift to the city to create that kind of protected plaza. I think it also is another way, and also for the Mediterranean lifestyle where people really do live outdoors, I think it's quite a nice way of adapting it to the local kind of, let's say, lifestyle, or at least in Spain, people really do live the plazas of the city, let's say.
And now focusing again on Greece, obviously you are doing the project, the park rise at Lincoln. So how do you incorporate in this specific project local culture, climate, and sustainability goals, let's say?
Yeah, so I think if we start with sort of the general approach to this building is, of course, also that it has a limited amount of glazed surface, which kind of provides sufficient of course, daylight into the units, and also taking advantage of this quite amazing view that it has of the sea and the park. But it also, by having, in essence, one side of each unit glazed and the other kind of opaque, it creates a roughly 50-50 between the opaque facade and the glazed facade, which is a good ratio to be at when you want to create a sustainable envelope. And then, of course, it hits a lead kind of goal, this building, which it's fairly ambitious, I would say, for a residential kind of type project. But it also, I think, very much pick up on a more kind of social aspect of sustainability with the community, the sort of both. What we learned is that community is important, but privacy in your specific home is also very important. So I think what it does is nicely that it ensures like full privacy when you're on your individual terrace or penthouse terrace. But it has this kind of community garden and shaded community spaces, and of course the gym and the spa and all these things where people can meet when they want to. So I think somehow in terms of adapting to the more like local lifestyle, I think that seemed to have hit kind of a good spot between sort of engaging and creating kind of a communal spaces, but also ensuring privacy at home, let's say.
You did mention also the project in New York. Like obviously there are increasing challenges like flooding around the world. And how do you ensure not just in a specific project like that, but in general, resilience and adaptability to certain challenges like flooding?
So when we work with, let's say, coast-near projects, we, of course, and especially, I mean, if it's a more, let's say, urban scale or master plan level, we do in the landscape design always build in these kind of buffers, right? Like flooding areas that, or resilience pools that can retain water if the water level rises or when it comes heavy rain. So we try to work around it as a part and a quality of the public space and the park areas specifically to ensure the water treatment is sufficiently kind of taken care of and future-proofed. And then, of course, on architectural projects, smaller scale, it becomes a bit more sort of to ensure you have the right levels and in there, and that you can kind of accommodate the rising water levels as well.
And would the landscape, for example, an architecture project play a role in that?
Say again, sorry?
Would the landscape and architecture projects play a role in that?
Yeah, I think what we do, and we also have landscape architects within BIG, and we also do a lot of collaborations, of course, is that we really try to think from the very start the landscape and the public space together with the architecture. So we do somehow try to make sure we plan for it from the start so it doesn't become an afterthought, right? And often these kind of spaces can also have a great value for the landscape and the public spaces when there are no kind of floods happening, right? So I think it's sort of a form of win-win situation when you think, you just need to think in advance, right? Rather than sort of having afterthoughts and sort of repairs.
And it
rather
helps
than-
that you have a very multidisciplinary team, right?
Yes, and I think at Big, in our company, we do, of course, have a lot of disciplines, the architecture, urban planning, landscape architects, product designers, engineers as well. But and that's a great sort of resource to have in-house. But of course, we also do always set up multidisciplinary teams, and depending on the program and the project itself, they can vary. I'm currently working on also a museum, and there, of course, we engage with exhibition and museum consultants early on, art historians, and we sort of always try to engage the right team. Also acknowledging very much that we don't have all the answers, but we try to make sure we, through the process, get the input from all the right sort of stakeholders or the right kind of disciplines.
I can go on forever about it, but I will just wrap this up. What advice would you give to architects aiming to basically integrate sustainability and resilience, since these are the big, let's say, terms of this presentation, into their designs?
It's a big question.
Very big.
No,
no pun
do
intended.
Think, no, exactly. My advice, I think, is generally, or the way I think we at Big work with it, and there are many different ways, of course, but it's to really analyze each project, and we know the challenges, right? We have the energy, the production, and to reduce the consumption as one focus area, carbon footprints as another one, and of course, beyond that, we also have biodiversity and social kind of well-being and social sustainability, and I think you need to analyze each specific project. I do not believe there's one answer to every project, right? It's not a universal solution, but I do think it's clearly an area that we need to focus on going forward. We see consequences of it kind of happening on a daily basis almost. So I do think it's something that all architects need to focus on, and also grow their knowledge, grow our knowledge of, and sort of together, of course, with engineering disciplines, see how we can sort of work it into each project. And sometimes, I think looking back to how things were done earlier on can lead us to have a better answer on how to build in the future. Or